Hello, everyone. Good evening. We are going to wait a few moments for everyone to jump in, but thanks for coming tonight to the Untitled Plan, what the comprehensive remedial plan means for teacher retention and support. Hola a todos, empezaremos en un momento. Gracias a todos por unirse esta noche a lo que el Plan Leandro significa para el apoyo y la retención de los maestros y maestras. Empezaremos en unos momentos ya que terminen de entrar las personas. Hello to everyone who's joining us. Thanks for being here. Today, we will be speaking about teacher retention and support and how the Leandro Plan supports that. We are waiting a few moments to let everyone else who's going to be joining us join us. Hola a todos, empezaremos en unos momentos. Hello, everyone. It is 7:04. We can get started and hope that we have other people joining us tonight. My name is Cristo Salazar, and I am the coalition coordinator with Every Child in Sea. Today, we want to thank League of Women Voters for co-hosting this event with us and our sponsors, Charlotte East, International House, and Carolina Juice for Justice. And the coalition is committed to language access. And tonight, we're going to be providing Spanish interpretation for Spanish speakers. And shortly, I will introduce Susan, who will give us instructions on how we can access that channel. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Cristo Daniel Salazar. Les quiero dar las gracias por unirse esta noche. Nosotros nos estamos comprometidos al acceso del lenguaje, entonces tenemos a Susan que nos va a guiar en cómo acceder al español en el canal. Te lo paso a ti, Susan.
Muy buenas noches. Good evening, everybody. Esta noche la presentación será en inglés, como acaba de mencionar Cristo. Entonces, si desea escuchar en español, haga clic en el botón que dice interpretación que pronto aparecerá en su pantalla. O sea, yo tengo que dejar de hablar para que aparezca este botón. Entonces, busque en su computadora el botón que dice interpretación, parece un globito, y haga clic ahí y de ahí escoja el idioma español únicamente. Good evening, everybody. As Cristo mentioned, the presentation will be in English, and if you would like to listen in Spanish, when I'm done talking and interpretation button will appear at the bottom of your screen on your computer that says interpretation. It looks like a little globe. And if you'd like to listen in Spanish, you click that button and then choose the Spanish language. Si está conectado a través de su teléfono, haga clic en los tres puntitos en la parte inferior de la pantalla. En el menú, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas. De ahí puede escoger el idioma español y para finalizar es importante apretar el botón finalizar o done o listo que aparece en la parte superior de su pantalla. If you are on your smartphone on the Zoom app, click the three little dots at the bottom of the screen. And then again, once interpretation is enabled, you will, in the menu that shows up, you'll see language interpretation. If you click that, then you can choose the Spanish language if you'd like to listen to that. And then you must hit done, which is at the top of the screen. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much. Back to you, Crystal. And you can
Thank you so much, Susan. I think we're ready to get started.
Good evening. I'm John Lee of the League of Women Voters of Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and I want to welcome you to the webinar on teacher retention and support. We are pleased to present this webinar tonight, and our hope is that it will lead to a greater understanding of the problems posed by teacher retention and its impact on the quality of education that our schools are able to deliver. In addition, we'll identify ways to take action to help inform legislators of the need for increased education spending and support of teachers. We are lucky to have Matt Ellenwood and Sarah Montgomery from Every Child, North Carolina, to explain the problems and to help identify the way forward. In addition, we will get stories from the front line that includes a teacher, a principal, a student, and a parent. They'll give us a look as to what is happening to the quality of education because of teacher retention problems. They will be introduced later. You may have questions as we go along, and we urge you to use the chat box in Zoom that can be found at the bottom of the screen. We will organize the questions and try to answer them at the end of the seminar. Questions for which we don't have time to get to, we will review in a follow-up email. But before we get to the meat of the matter, let me move to a few basic facts that define the problem for us here in Mecklenburg County. Next slide. We got about a 10% loss of our teacher workforce every year. That means that we get about a 50% loss every 5 years. And that's a lot of work and a lot of money to hire and train new teachers. Part of the problem is, as we see on the next slide, that we haven't kept up with salaries. We're below the national average. A young person starting out in education will make less than their friends in the banking business or in any other kind of profession or trade with similar levels of education. In fact, teacher salaries have been declining in the more recent history. And so that we have a problem where you can see the frustration that we have in time that we are looking at. Next slide would show us a little bit, not only is it about money, but it's about professional growth opportunities and this kind of autonomy that teachers have lost. They feel they're not being listened to, that people don't care about their point of view. Plus, they have cuts of school personnel that support teachers. So if you've got problem students, you've got difficulties with health or with food in your student group, you need librarians and nurses and counselors and teachers' assistants helping with that support, and those have been disappearing from the system, as well as declining teacher salaries. And finally, in our next slide, we kind of talk about the emphasis on teaching and the administrative burdens. You've got hall duty, you've got to oversee at lunchtime, little bites of time in each day. And most teachers I know spend their own money to buy materials that they use in their classroom. And then they have also the whole problem of test scores that are mandated and often part of an evaluation process that is probably not as effective as people think. So we find ourselves finally with a world of loss in the teaching world. And I think finally in the last slide, we see that the COVID has made it worse and that they have little kind of opportunity to find their way forward in a new kind of modified teaching situation. So as we look at the change of time, Matt will give us an overview of the problem as they see it from a state level as well as a local level. So Matt, would you like to take over now?
Sorry about that. Am I sharing my screen now?
Yeah.
All right. Should look the same as it did before, but I think I'm the one in control now. So thanks so much for having me. My name is Matt Ellenwood. I'm the director of the Education and Law Project at the North Carolina Justice Center. I'm a proud member of the Every Child NC coalition that formed around the development and implementation of the comprehensive remedial plan in the Leandro versus State of North Carolina case that we'll talk a little bit about today. I think John did a great job talking about kind of what's been going on with teachers in the recent years. The Leandro case timeline goes back even further. It's a case from the early 1990s. It involves the interpretation of our constitutional provisions dealing with education in the North Carolina State Constitution. So we all take our right to education for granted, but it doesn't live in the US Constitution like a lot of our basic rights do. It actually lives in the various state constitutions. So we're really fortunate in North Carolina to have a very strong set of educational provisions developed over time, but in part during some of the Reconstruction era, and then more recently, but there's always in the 70s when they redid parts of the Constitution as well. But there's always been a really strong emphasis on the provision of education in the state of North Carolina in terms of the Constitution. So that ultimately Leandro is really about what is the state's responsibility in terms of providing an education system. Is it just to have schools that are open? Is it to have schools that actually adequately prepare children, students for participation in society, for work, for what comes after school? So it's been about kind of figuring out what's the actual bottom line of what the state has to provide in order to be meeting its constitutional obligation. So I won't go through the entire timeline of what's happened in this case over decades. We've gotten some rulings early on that established what you may have heard the constitutional standard in the case is that all students are entitled to the opportunity to receive a sound basic education. I think over the years it's become kind of what is a sound basic education is really the question then. So that's not much clearer than just what the Constitution says. So we've had to kind of go back and forth into court over time, and with the state reacting to some of the court decisions, making some changes where there was some positive growth in terms of student achievement and the teachers' pay and some of the differences John showed, and it actually led to an upswing in terms of test scores on things like the National Assessment for Educational Progress and other ways we try to compare our state to other states and look at how we're doing over time. In more recent years, we've really backed off of our commitment to funding education in the aftermath of the Great Recession. That a lot of states had similar cuts during the Great Recession, but what North Carolina hasn't done is they've sort of kept things at that austerity level from the time when we were losing revenue very quickly as a state because of the recession. Fast forward to more recent years, starting in 2017, I think one big difference was that it had always been an adversarial process, the districts against the state, with the state being represented by the governor and the State Board of Education. When the Governor Cooper took over and the state board's composition kind of changed, we ended up with more of a collaborative process. And now that led to some pretty important breakthroughs in the case, where the parties moved to have an independent consultant look at the state's education system and come up with a set of recommendations for how North Carolina can meet the constitutional minimum. That's what's commonly called the Wested report. And that was really important because in spite of the fact this case has been going on for so long, we never had actually the development of a plan from the state. We've had bits and pieces as things have emerged, like disadvantaged student supplemental funding, or a commitment to our pre-kindergarten program at different stages in the case. But we've never had this type of comprehensive plan we're going to talk about today. The comprehensive remedial plan looks at the whole system from pre-kindergarten all the way up into the transitions to college and career. So the independent consultant came in, and it was, it's been pointed out they're a California-based company, and so that's been one of the criticisms that's been levied against it by people who are opponents of this. It's a really well-respected organization, some of the biggest experts in the country on this stuff. They also did partner with NC State locally. And what I thought was really impressive was they did some statistical modeling to figure out what different types of investments need to be put in. But what is more meaningful to me is they convened panels across the state of teachers, administrators, principals, parents, business leaders, to determine what are the resources you need in your community, in your school, that would help provide the level of opportunity that we're talking about here, to give children a meaningful opportunity to be successful in school and in life after school. So that's the Leandro Consultants Report, which ended up being an 8-year plan that includes it's hundreds of pages long, tons of recommendations, lots of investments that they recommend, that ultimately became really the basis of the comprehensive remedial plan in the case. So the state ultimately had to submit that plan, but they drew very heavily from the Wested report, as well as the Governor's Commission on Access to a Sound Basic Education. And this was all done prior to the pandemic. So all of the big recommendations they had, and they said that we needed to invest $5 billion at least over 8 years in a variety of targeted ways just to meet the constitutional minimum. That would bring us to about the national average in terms of school funding effort and per student expenditures. And then the pandemic hit, and the same students whose constitutional rights had been most violated over this 20-some-odd-year period are the same students who suffered the biggest losses in the pandemic. And we're starting to get some research from the Department of Public Instruction on how heavily that has fallen on the same student groups who are most at risk in the case, as defined by the case, which is students living in economically disadvantaged communities and families that have low incomes, multilingual learners, students with disabilities. Those are student groups that have been identified in the case as those who are, again, at most at risk. So then the new judge in the case, who was appointed by the Supreme Court at the same time these plans were developed and helped to get these plans developed, has had a series of orders in recent years. And the one from November 11th here is the one that's currently at issue in the case you may hear about. The Supreme Court recently took up this case. And before the budget was passed, he ordered that the state has to allocate $1.7 billion to fund the years 2 and 3 of the comprehensive remedial plan, which were the years at issue in this year's budget, or this last budget cycle, even though it's an 8-year plan. So there's more to it than that, but that was what was missing prior to having the budget. The enforcement of that ruling was blocked. This is what was funded in the budget in terms of what's in the comprehensive remedial plan. So this is sort of one of our biggest, you could say this would be one of the biggest sort of advocacy wins that our group has had, our coalition has had, and also one of the biggest loss, because you can't fund the 50% or 40% of a constitutional right in this way. It is a comprehensive plan, so funding bits and pieces of it doesn't really work. It's all designed to fit together in terms of the way a student experiences school from early childhood all the way on up to college and career. But this shows, I think, what leverage the case does give in terms of actually pushing the legislature to make more substantial investments in education, because you can see these are large numbers. It was, hundreds of millions of dollars in each year's budget that was allocated towards the comprehensive remedial plan. So that's what's really at issue in the case, is the remainder of what wasn't funded here. So you'll hear a lot about that probably on the news over the next couple of months as the Supreme Court considers that. And this is exactly what the trial court was asked by the Supreme Court to look at. What are these numbers, in terms of what should be at issue when they review the case at the Supreme Court? What was the impact of the budget on the Leandro Plan? So John did a really great job, I think, of laying out some of the issues, some of the problems. This can hopefully have the beginnings of a plan to have some of the solutions in place. And it's not something that can happen overnight. That's why it's an 8-year plan. And I think, we have as I mentioned, this is the constitutional provision I was talking about earlier. It is very strong. It says that the General Assembly shall provide for a general and uniform system of free public schools. And this part's very strong, wherein equal opportunities shall be provided for all students. I don't think anybody thinks that we're actually providing equal educational opportunities for all students. It's a really aspirational standard that we've never been able to meet. Purpose of this slide is really to show, I think, for a lot of people, especially if you've lived in other states, if you see issues in your school in terms of resource inadequacies, if you see problems with the buildings or the textbooks or lack of teachers, and some of the things we've seen where we have teachers teaching, virtually from other schools in our schools, where schools that lack, AP courses, or teachers who are special education teachers, things like that, teacher assistants. I think that the natural thing to do is to go to your own school, or maybe your own district or county commission, and see the problems lying there. But North Carolina, because of our really strong educational provisions in our Constitution and just the history of the state had to step in many times over the years, particularly in the Great Depression, and take on a stronger role in funding schools, because we had districts that literally couldn't even operate or open schools without this level of state support. So because of that history and the strength of the constitutional provision, the state plays this really huge role. So I think it's a hard thing to understand that if your school is, has a shortage of teachers, has a shortage of nurses, therapists, and most of what the state funds are those types of positions, not necessarily the other operational costs of schools. It's really what the state funds is the actual people. So when you see those problems, it's hard for people to trace it back to the state, and it's even harder still to figure out what to do about it. And that's something that's why our coalition came together, was because we understood that the problem was primarily at the state level, and that's where the advocacy needed to happen, but that there still needs to be a local element to that, since that's where everyone's experiencing their issues in schools. So it's connecting what's happening in your school to these larger state issues that is really one of the biggest challenges in this work, but it's one that you can't get around. And there are some good things about the state having this big role, because they can sort of make it more equitable in terms of how funding is distributed, and ensure that resources go to schools and communities that need them most if it's done well. So just a little bit more, this is probably backing up similar things to what John was talking about. You can see we've never been that great, but in terms of how our teacher pay stacks up against the national average. And you can see during the recession, as I mentioned, we didn't really fill it in. We kind of backtracked even further and got further and further away from the national average, and we're still a little bit further away from the national average than we were when the recession began. That is mainly a function of our funding effort. So this is kind of a messy looking set of lines, but Those percentages on the left are the percentage of your GDP. So these lines represent the percentage of the gross domestic product, what is the state bringing in economically or producing, that then goes towards education. And you can see we contribute the smallest amount of that in the Southeast of any place, or of any place in the Southeast. So we have the lowest school funding effort. And we always do very poorly on national, sort of national comparisons of how states look compared to one another. And that's, of course, all these things have had an impact on the number of people who want to enroll in the teaching profession. You can see this is the number of people who are enrolling in who are education majors in the UNC system over time. Lots of different ways to show that same information. So the Leandro Plan, the comprehensive remedial plan, is really about having a roadmap of how you build back once you've had that level of disinvestment over such a long period of time. And so these are I'm just going to breeze through these, but not all of them are by name about teacher retention recruitment, but I think they all do have an impact. A lot of it is about the funding model and ensuring that they're adequate to actually provide all the positions and things that we need. So as I mentioned, the state needs to increase funding by $5 billion over the next 8 years. Number two is, it's very specific about recognizing the role that teachers do play. As John mentioned, they're the most important sort of input in terms of improving student outcomes. How do we provide a qualified, well-prepared, and diverse teaching staff in every school? How do we ensure that hard-to-staff schools have ways to recruit teachers and retain teachers, and sort of entice them to come to some of the schools that are harder to staff? And that was something we used to be a national leader in and have backed off of. Principals have always, both of these principals and teachers have always been a really important element of the Leandro Plan. Recognizing their importance and that they're really the two of the biggest keys in terms of how students experience school. So, the third recommendation is about how do we get qualified and well-prepared principals in every school, and particularly into the lowest performing schools where principals can have a really big impact turning around those schools. We also have, we want to provide all at-risk students with the opportunity to attend high quality early education programs. I think that's important for teachers because if students aren't coming to school prepared in kindergarten and they're coming in already behind, that just makes their job even harder. And investing in those programs is one way to help that. Some of it is about directing more resources into high poverty schools. And then that again does have something to do with, that can do things like provide salary supplements and things like that to recruit and retain teachers to those districts that have the most trouble doing so. Revised the A through F grading system that we've seen does sort of stigmatize a lot of low performing schools and can hurt morale. We hope that we'll have this panel that oversees the court and monitoring, or that oversees the implementation of the plan and includes parents and teachers. So just real quick, and then so this is at the top when we send it around is a link to the entire teacher retention plan in the Leandro comprehensive remedial plan. So there's a large section on that I'm just going to go through a little bit of the highlights. The first one is obviously we need to increase teacher compensations so that salaries are competitive with other states and other career options, as John mentioned, that require similar levels of preparation and education experience. We also want to enable low wealth districts to have additional compensation to make them more competitive with our more advantaged districts. That's something we see a lot. People move from some of the lower performing districts to the higher performing districts after they get experience. And then we've seen, John also mentioned this, we've lost a lot of professional development. We've completely lost professional development opportunities at the state level. It's been completely cut down to $0. So that's something we need to build back. There's a section on increasing the pipeline of diverse, well-prepared teachers by expanding the North Carolina Teaching Fellows Program. That was something that was inexplicably cut a few years ago. They've started to bring it back in kind of a smaller form, but the Leandro Plan recommends building the plan up much larger just so that it prepares 1,500 teachers a year by 2028. Of course, teachers in that get a lot of supports. They get loan forgiveness. It's a way to make the teaching profession a lot more desirable to people who are just coming into the profession, thinking about it as a profession. There's some innovative things in there, like developing teacher residency programs. So the idea is to have each high need district have a high quality residency program. We've seen a successful model of this in Edgecombe County. It's a way to deal with the fact that some districts just have so much trouble attracting new teachers and developing their own teachers. Same thing with these. These are some other kind of innovative ideas about how you can deal with the difficulties of recruiting and retaining teachers in some high need districts. So each school district ought to have access to high quality teacher recruitment and development programs like Grow Your Own, which is something where you are beginning kind of earlier in the high school period to recruit teachers and provide incentives for them to enter the teaching profession, whether again it be things like loan forgiveness or different types of financial incentives to stay in the district. 2 and 2 programs are going to community college, and you can begin those while you're in high school and pursue a teaching credential while you're still in high school, and then you can get some funding to help with your college costs as well for those remaining 2 years as you work towards your degree. So it's a way to make the teaching profession more desirable and a way to avoid taking on high levels of loans. And then a lot of it is also about providing high quality mentoring. Mentoring is a program that we used to have strong mentoring supports using state funding that was cut in the state budget, also down to 0 in the early 2010s. So that's something that they would recommend bringing back because it's a way to improve working conditions for teachers. The Drive Task Force is something that came together. It was brought together by Dr. Anthony Graham, who's provost at Winston-Salem State. Brought together a lot of people who are experts on the teaching profession, work at the education schools and the teacher preparation programs. They included some people who work in the policy world like myself. And we developed these recommendations that have been incorporated into the comprehensive remedial plan in the Leandro case. So that's a link to that as well. That was sent around where you can see there's pretty extensive recommendations there as well. So purpose would be, I think, that teacher recruitment and retention is a huge part of this plan. It costs money, obviously. It's not something that's free, but it's an incredibly important part of it because it's recognizing what John said, that the most important factor in a student's educational experience is the teacher, and it's a really huge portion of what the plan involves. So just really quickly too, we're trying to show what these things would mean locally because it's difficult to get your mind around what these kind of billions of dollars numbers mean as an entire state. If the comprehensive remedial plan were actually adopted, this is what it would mean in Charlotte Mecklenburg School District. So you'd have a 30% overall increase in per student funding. You'd have funding for 826 additional instructional support personnel. So that means nurses, counselors, psychologists, therapists, and social workers. Some of those positions that have had really bad shortages over the years. And of course, we've had major problems with nurses who serve multiple different schools and go from school to school, and schools that don't have nurses on site the majority of days during the week. We've had huge cuts in textbook funding at the state level. This would increase that by 140%. Teaching assistants have been some of the biggest funding cuts that we've seen in the time that I've been doing this over the past decade. Large increase, over 7 times more funding for teacher assistants. We'd have 24 community schools coordinators. So the idea is to create community school programs, particularly in hard to staff schools or economically disadvantaged schools. And just in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools alone, there would be 2,610 additional NC pre-K slots, as well as investments in the whole early childhood system, like the child care subsidies, Smart Start programs that serve younger children, as we've learned more about the kind of continuum of care that needs to happen from birth all the way up into kindergarten to ensure students come to school ready to learn. So this is a one-pager that we've developed that we can share that shows a lot of these same numbers. We want this to be something that's useful for people to use and to share potentially with, you know, with media who's interested in this as well, especially as the case progresses. And we really do, in terms of people who are interested in taking action around this, like I said, I'm really proud to be part of this Every Child NC Coalition. We have ways on our website, everychildnc.org, to advocate. We can, you know, we have action alerts for people who are comfortable talking to or contacting legislators, people who are interested in holding other events like this about issues that are important in your community and how the Leandro Plan might relate to those or help be a way forward on some of those. We're always interested in going around doing public education events to help people learn more about this and some of the opportunities that are involved. We have our local board resolutions that we want to encourage school boards and county commissions to adopt. So there's a lot of resources on there, and you can always contact us. So let me definitely stop there because I see on the chat and see some hands up. Should I stop for questions here? Is that okay before we pass it along to Jean to introduce the panelists, I think? Sorry, Jean.
If you want to, go ahead. You want to address Jane's question real quick, just about what's at risk with the case with swapping out Judge Robinson for Judge Lee, Matt?
Yeah, that's a good question. So hopefully not. I mean, I think when we got the news that change was happening, that was an interesting day. I think the overall news of the day was viewed by the attorneys in the case as actually positive, not because the judge was changed, but because that happened on the same day that we knew the Supreme Court was taking up the case. So the really important thing was for the Supreme Court to take this case up quickly. This has gone on for too long. We believe that a majority of the current Supreme Court will understand that something needs to be done here. So we were happy to see that they took it up and they put very kind of short deadlines on the remand to the lower court, only 30 days, although they've just given a 7-day extension. But we were happy to see they were moving with some speed after this case has languished for far too long. Of course, after they remanded the case to the trial court, that's when the Chief Justice decided to change the judge in the case from Judge Lee to Judge Robinson. We did have some concerns, but certainly wanted to give him a chance to see how he would do. And I think in his first hearing, it seemed like he was not inclined to move beyond what he was directed to do by the Supreme Court. I think they wrote the order very clearly that what he needed to be doing in this 30-day period, or now 37-day period, was look at the impact of the budget on Judge Lee's November ruling, because as we saw, some of it was funded. Some of the plan was funded in the budget, almost around half. So then it's not $1.7 billion that's at issue. We have to go back and figure out exactly how much was funded, how much of what was in the budget ought to count as meeting the Leandro Plan goals, and go from there. Because so then when they consider what they're going to consider, they have the actual correct dollar amount that's at issue now that some of it was funded. He seemed in the first hearing like he was not inclined to open it up to everything under the sun or to throw the case out. It's just very hard to get around what the Supreme Court said in that order in the 30-day period. If he was supposed to be doing something so extensive, then they wouldn't have written the order that way. And I think nobody really likes to get overturned that way. I think the other thing is he can't, even if he were to move and do something incredibly extreme like that and throw the case out, you could still then appeal that to the Supreme Court. So it would go right back to the Supreme Court regardless. And so the Supreme Court has the final say on any of this, regardless of what this judge may do. It looked like he wasn't going to go totally rogue and not follow the order or anything like that. But even if he were to, you have that backstop of knowing that the Supreme Court's going to take it on right away and would be able to obviously change that if they wanted to. I'm trying to see if there's any more.
I think we might want to, Jean, go ahead and introduce our panelists, and maybe we can address some of these other questions after we hear from them.
Okay, thank you. We're very pleased to have 4 panelists to share their perspectives, and I'd like to introduce them now. Greg Ischuto is an English teacher at Garinger High School. A 2018 CMS Teacher of the Year, Greg is passionate about building local and statewide partnerships that foster educational and economic opportunities for East Charlotte youth and their families. Then we have student Abby Hancock. Abby is a junior and athlete at Garinger High School. After moving from upstate New York in 2018, Abby started her academic career in Mecklenburg County, earning A's and B's and taking multiple honors and AP courses to put her at the top of her class. Her goal is to attend Columbia University in New York City. We will then hear from Principal Lorian Denian. Lorinda Denian has served as the principal of Idlewild Elementary School since July 2014. She is the 2021-2022 Principal of the Year and the 2022 Southwest Region of North Carolina Principal of the Year. As a principal, she's committed to ensuring a positive school culture, increasing students' social, economic achievement, supporting teachers and staff with their growth and development, providing families with access and resources, and serving their community. We also will hear from parent Anna Miriam Carpio. She is married and is the parent of 3 children who attend Waddell, South Meck, and Central Piedmont. Originally from El Salvador, Anna Miriam has lived here for over 20 years. She founded Unisol, a nonprofit that serves the immigrants, and is on the board of the North Carolina Congress of Latinos. A small business owner, she is passionate about finding solutions and creating change for the community. Thank you. I think we're going to start with Greg first, please. Greg.
Hello, good evening all. Thank you for having me this evening. My name is Greg Ischuto, and I am an English teacher at Garinger High School in the beautiful East Charlotte, North Carolina. So to give a little bit of framing for my piece right here, I'm going to give a little bit of background as to some site-specific details about teacher turnover that I've experienced in the past 8 years, give some explanations as to why, and then try to explain the value of retention, what that looks like. So, you know, when I came in 8 years ago, which has been 2014, I had a cohort of 30 teachers that I came in with, 15 of whom were first year lateral entry through Teach for America. Today, I'm the only one left in that group. In fact, of a faculty of roughly 120, I am the seventh longest tenured individual at that school. Starting next week, I will be on my 4th principal in 8 years when he takes over. And to put this kind of into data perspective, since 2014, we have had a 22% average 1-year annual turnover, right? So really trying to give ground level details and illustrations as to why this happens. Why is there turnover? You know, sure, you have school specific issues. Obviously you have district specific issues, but the one thing I always try to impart and stress is stress. It is stress. It's gotten to the point, you know, that things get very overwhelming. And I also want to frame this too in the context of pre-COVID. Granted, COVID has completely exacerbated any issues, but pre-COVID, it was no cakewalk by any means. You know, when you're talking about having a classroom full of maybe 35 children, right? I'll give the specific example of one of my classes in 2015. I had 25 students last period of the day in an English course. 7 of them were identified as McKinney-Vento, which means that they federally identified as homeless. I had 15 of those students were identified as students with disabilities, and 3 of those students were identified as English language learners. I did have a co-teacher in that class who quit halfway through the year. So you're talking about dealing with immense academic and socio-emotional needs solo. And it gets to the point where it almost have to check yourself and not being deficit-minded about the students, but it's that much pressure and stress that sometimes you just can't handle it. And I told the Observer last week, Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, is proposing a supplement increase to make CMS teachers have the highest local supplement in the state. And even if we were to be paid $100,000, we still have to do social work, still have to do coaching, still have to do conflict resolution, still have to do crisis management for both students and staff. For many, it's not worth it, which I think really ties into the comprehensive plan, right? It's not just about teacher pay. It is about so many other factors that cause teachers to leave the classroom. The stress of the responsibilities of not having enough social workers, of not having enough counselors. Right now at Garinger, I believe we have 5 counselors for 1,750 students, and we have 1 social worker for the whole school, and then we have 1 specifically designated for our homeless students, of which we have about 70 right now, I believe. So I'm very excited for Abby to join in a moment to really show what this looks like as the consequences for students. But before I go, I do want to briefly explain, the value of staying and the value of stability, right? And why should we try to keep on to teachers besides the obvious? Stability moves mountains for students and for families. This year, I'm teaching freshman English. I have 2 students whose brothers I had 8 years ago in my first year teaching. And the familiarity with me and me with their families, immediately off the jump, that makes a huge impact. I just had a student before the panel reach out to me asking for who graduated last year for support navigating the CPCC waters because he knows I'm still there. And that stability in education, there are very few things that I've seen be groundbreaking movers for students like stability. But I'm going to let Miss Abby Hancock go ahead and speak to how this turnover issue looks from a student perspective. So thank you. And Abby?
Thank you, Mr. Ischuto. Hi, my name is Abby Hancock. I'm a junior and athlete at Garinger High School, and I basically had my teacher for AP Calculus. He left in the early start of the semester, and our class wasn't really that big. There's about 6, 7 of us in the class, and so it was really small class. Many of us all became close with each other. Many of us became close with each other to develop a relationship with each other. And, we were all able to, be able to trust one another, especially when it came to having to navigate what to do once our teacher left. And many of us, well, specifically myself, I tend to, stress really easily. And, especially with school and stuff, it's pretty hard, and especially with calculus, because calculus isn't the easiest thing to learn in the world. If you took it, it's not really that easy. And especially an AP course, because, mostly in school, the AP is taken really seriously. And, I chose the class myself, and so I decided to take it seriously. But then, once the teacher left and, being dispersed in multiple different classes with teachers that doesn't even teach that subject or doesn't even teach math in general, it just makes you question whether or not, it's worth it to continue with the class. And, I have friends in that class that, talk with their counselors and, told me that our counselor said that if we were to drop the class, our GPAs might drop. And, many of us have the plan or idea of going to a 4-year college. And, we want to have a good future for ourselves. And, our GPA dropping isn't really going to be beneficial towards us reaching that goal in our lives. And so, me and my friend, we try to stick it out together. We work together on our work. And, many of us now, like I said earlier, we all built a relationship with each other, and we have trust in each other that we know that we're all going to like get through this class together. And, I had teachers that, that I would tell this about, and they would always try to, suggest solutions to my problems. I told family members like my mom about it. Her response was just to drop the class, but she knows that, I'm a stubborn person when it comes to me wanting to achieve my goals. And so, my family, they could continue to support me in my choice of continuing this class, including with the teachers I told about, this current problem. And, currently, me and my classmates, we came up with a plan to make sure that we pass the class this year, since, the school year is almost over, and to potentially score a good score on our AP exam this year. And, we all talk, we plan like events for us, like staying after school to work, to study. And just, we communicate with counselors, we communicate with administrators on things. We also have, we had someone from CMS that actually come and have a Zoom meeting with us and try to teach us the content as much as she possibly can, through Zoom. And, we plan to have meetings with her every Wednesday or Friday. And, we try to attend them as best as we can. And, it's very beneficial to us. But although, it all does sound good of, having adults that are supportive to us, when you really think about it from, my point of view, sometimes it just like isn't enough at some point. Because, when you're like, like for instance, I get very bad anxiety when I'm stressed. And, just when it comes to testing in general, and, my academics, I take it very seriously. And with, me not being able to do the best that I know I can, it's just gotten worse over the past year or so. And, I feel that possibly, us, Gardner specifically, having, more teachers or more people that specialize in like certain courses just might be more beneficial to students. Because, many of us at my school, we really don't. Some of us have an idea what we want to do in the future, some of us don't. And it's honestly, you don't really have no one unless you have a teacher that, you could trust. Because, sometimes your family might not support you. And, I'm lucky enough to have my mom and my, family to support me in my decisions on continuing with this class. That's all I really have to say, I believe. I would like to pass it to Mrs. Deneen, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. Thank you for having me, by the way.
That was awesome, Abby. It was so great to hear the perspective of a student, especially a student that is doing such incredible work like you, and being able to advocate for yourself and work together with your other students and your peers actually, to make great things happen and having great support. And I really want to echo what Mr. Ischuto said. Stability is a critical factor in the success of everyone in every aspect, not just in schools. Our students do need that stability, and so do our teachers. I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I feel like I've contributed at Idlewild, is being there for the past 8 years, being able to see families come from kindergarten all the way through 5th grade and still being connected to them at while they're at East Mech in high school. And just knowing that, that teacher turnover is such a detrimental factor. And prior to the pandemic, I will say, I'm super, super proud to say that we had a very low turnover rate. But in the last year, we've lost several teaching positions. Lots of teachers have decided to leave the profession and take on jobs in other markets and areas. And definitely we know that the teacher pay is not what it needs to be. It's not what it should be for the amount of countless hours that teachers put in every single day. It's not a job that you get to leave at work. As soon as you leave for the day, students are constantly on your mind. You're thinking about lesson planning. You're thinking about how you can support your students. You're thinking about how you're going to collaborate and support your colleagues, because that stability factor is needed there as well. Also thinking about how we can support our families, especially in those higher poverty areas, because they need access to resources and support. They need community involvement. They need agencies to be involved to be able to help them. The pandemic has definitely put us in a position that has changed the face of education as we know it. And we all have to be committed to thinking about what that change looks like and how we can move forward, what we can learn from the pandemic, and how we can continue to collaborate and make sure that our children are getting the best that they need, but also that our teachers and staff are getting the best that they need. Many people believe that we should be able to return to normal, but we are not there yet. We are very busy in schools supporting the mental health and wellness of our students. As a school principal, I'm supporting the mental health and wellness of my teachers and staff. The pandemic has definitely impacted us in more ways than we can even conceptualize or verbalize. We've got students that have experienced a great deal of trauma and they need support with that. But in order to do that, our teachers need support with trauma-informed practices. They need to know how to support students, what resources are available to support students. And we need the people to be able to do that. Counselors, social workers, communities in schools, different agencies, school-based mental health, support for families. We have so many families who have lost jobs during the pandemic. They need financial resources and support. They need help with securing employment. And I know that we're a school, but it's our responsibility to be able to provide that level of support and care to our families, because ultimately they're the number one factor in ensuring that students get to school and that they're supported academically, socially, and emotionally at home. And we're supporting our students in the classroom after they've been at home for almost 2 years. And at home, some of them did have access to a lot of one-on-one support and had someone there helping them side by side. Abby is very, very fortunate to have a family that supports her. Many of our students did not have that. Many of our elementary students might have been at home all day with a sibling that was in middle school or high school. And we really need more time for teaching the social and emotional learning skills, collaboration skills. They have not been in school where they've had that structure. The parameters have been set. The natural way and order of things in a school of helping children learn how to get along with their peers, how to communicate effectively, how to support one another, how to empathize. And our teachers are carrying that weight, especially this year more than ever. And our teachers want to feel supported and they want to feel valued and cared for. Pay is just one tiny way of showing them that they're valued, showing them that they are going to get your support. They have a lack of autonomy right now. There's a lot of mandates coming from the federal government, from the state, from the district. And a lot of our teachers are feeling like they don't have the autonomy that they once had. And a lot of that also stems from the fact that a lot of our portion of the day is set aside to support the social, emotional, mental health, and wellness needs of our students. And our teachers are also carrying that for their colleagues. They're being a sounding board when other teachers on their grade level or staff members in the school need some support. So we've really got to do a better job in our state of supporting that. We know that we cannot compete with the salaries of corporate America in our profession. And I really want to advocate to the state for the fact that our profession as educators is one of the only professions where a person can graduate from a 4-year program with a bachelor's degree, maybe even go beyond and leave with a master's degree or higher, and still need a second job to survive and pay their bills. We cannot continue to do this to our teachers and our staff. They need our support, and they need mental health and wellness support as well. So we've got to figure out ways that we can really band together as a community to make sure that our teachers are supported, our staff is supported, our students are supported, and our families are supported. Now more than ever, they need us. And we really have got to make sure that we're committed to doing the heavy lift that it's going to take to recover from the last 2 years of unfinished learning and the last 2 years of our students being away from the structure, the stability, the consistency, and the love that a school provides. Oh, and I'm sorry, let me turn it over to Anna Miriam, our awesome parent.
Okay. Oops. Hi, you hear me? Everybody?
Yes,
Oh,
we hear you.
okay, thank you so much. My name is Anna Miriam. Well, today I am in the office of my sister here in Boston, Massachusetts, in Riviera. My goodness, it's touched my heart a lot with this situation. I have 28 years living in Charlotte, and I'm representative. My three boys has 24, 16, and 14. And under me, thousands and thousands of families, they don't speak English, or they are feeling, very upset, and a lot of feeling and what happened with our education, why it's terrible right now, this situation, because we are late. My point today is to get an action together, because our teachers in all Mecklenburg County, in all North Carolina, I believe they are in crisis. When I say crisis, is lower money or zero money. Why? The budget is terrible. I am here because my son also, Anthony, he's 16 years old, he's in Selmec. November last year, he was feel upset, and he said, Mom, I feel so sad because our teacher in a high school, they don't have a good salary, Mom. Why? Why they don't have a good salary? Because teachers work like 3 times, like even professional. When my son, 16 years old, told me that, I say, my goodness, you're right, Anthony. So this is one voice, but we have thousands and thousands of voices. They don't have the ability to put this message in this platform. Wow, I take some notes with Mr. Matt, that what he said. Thank you for your presentation. Break my heart, because I love Charlotte. That's my town, that's my home. I would like to see growing my generations, my grandchild when my boys married. So, and that concern is education is everything. See, education is the knowledge. Education is, the more important, education in home and education with the teacher in our schools. But what happened right now? So of course we have a stress, we have a lot of problems, mental issue, we have the broken system, right? But our responsibility is take action, support our teachers, They need a good bonus. They need the best life insurance, the best retirement plans. They need the best salary. It's unbelievable. My sister, she is a teacher from here from Boston School. She moved from Charlotte, North Carolina in 2016. Why? Because in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2016, 2006, the salary was for her 27,000 yearly. Here in Boston, she was hiring for 47,000. So that, and I'm talking about like, my goodness, in 2006, she moved from Charlotte to here. Why our teacher, they don't want to be work anymore, or they quit, or they have stress. It's too much. It's a lot of work. They have take care of our children, our students. They have extra job. They have extra job for home, for qualifications. So is that enough? We need pressure. We need to take action. I know voters is coming very soon. The budget is already in this case. I was in the board meeting last Tuesday. So I'm sorry, 2 weeks ago. And I hear thousands and billions dollars. And I say, okay, where is the salary? I mean, can provide, how can we make changes? So I mean, I see many thousands of families, not only the Hispanic community. I'm support different ethnic community. So Charlotte is international community. My children speak English, Spanish, and Germany. So we are very blessed, and they have a great teachers, but it's injustice, the salary. So my petition is, we need to take action now, because we are very late. We are so late. 2 years ago, where the COVID came. So what happened with the superintendent and the board? They figured out the money, but they don't put money in our teachers. They figure out new buildings, new school buildings, right? But teachers need the best benefit. So our teachers, we need to take the good teachers for our children, our teenagers in the community college. So I am so glad to be a part of this panel, and I'm very happy to participate, but please, we need more hands, and we need to take action as soon as possible. So my petition is that make a solutions, but now. Well, thank you so much. I admire you to all. Thank you. God bless.
Sarah, are you with us to share some of these excellent next steps? I see you. We can't hear you, Sarah. We're going to give Sarah just a moment to figure out audio here. Hope it's not a problem on our end. She's coming. This is worth waiting for, folks. We appreciate everyone's patience with us, but when we have panels like this with such incredibly devoted and talented local leaders, nobody wants to try and wrap up what they have to say. But we do appreciate everybody hanging on, and we'll share the recording from tonight's program with everyone in the follow-up email. Sarah, are you with us? Sarah, do you want me to step through them? Well, I'm just going to start on this one slide. And my colleague Cristo with Every Child in Sea, maybe he can go ahead and reshare our website and the action alert. We've tried to make it easy for folks as they contact their members of the General Assembly, but absolutely, we want folks to stay informed. We want people to share conversations like tonight across your networks. We heard from so many different important perspectives represented with this issue tonight. So it's really important that we continue to share those stories. Sarah, I can turn it over to you whenever you're able.
Just one other thing while we're waiting.
Yeah.
You know, I think a good local effort that would be helpful to engage in is your county commissioners have passed our model resolution in support of the Leandro Plan, but the Board of Education has not. And anyone who's from adjacent counties, that would be helpful. I think that the more sort of local boards and county commissions that we can get to urge the General Assembly to fund the comprehensive remedial plan, the better. They have a lot of influence. You know, they have relationships with their legislators very frequently. The statewide associations for the School Boards Association and the County Commissioners Association have pretty strong lobbying presence. So in persuading your local elected officials really of all stripes, and we have encouraged all kinds of organizations to adopt these resolutions, whether it's PTAs, we've had organizations like the Wake Education Partnership, or we really want to have as many people kind of out there on record as being in support of funding and implementing this plan. So I can drop that in the chat really quick what that looks like, but you know, a lot of districts have taken it up, and like I said, your county commissioners have, but not yet on the Board of Education, as far as I'm aware.
Thanks, Matt. Sarah, are you able to join? If we don't get a chance to hear from Sarah, we can at least appreciate how much work she put into these really detailed next steps. So this is just a sampling of the steps that she's outlined. We're going to share everything in detail in the follow-up email. So again, Every Child in Sea has made it easy for you to contact your lawmakers directly. I love these 3 C's, the coalesce, collaborate, and coordinate. You'll be able to follow up with Sarah directly if you have any more thoughts to share about that. You know, and most especially, this is going to be a really consequential year for our local politics, and certainly for a big, important statewide case like Leandro. So that is always our message: stay informed, stay engaged, and do everything you can to communicate the importance of equitable school funding for our students in Charlotte Meck and for our students in districts across the state. So that's our program. Sarah, thank you so much for inspiring us with those next steps. I don't know if John or Jean or any of our speakers have anything to add. There were a couple questions that came in that I think we addressed as far as what can we do to influence these policy decisions that are being made. And absolutely contact your local reps, contact your local decision makers, and just join us in this advocacy. We appreciate everyone's time and leadership. Anybody have anything else to add before we wrap up?
I really want to thank everyone who joined us tonight to view this. We're so grateful to you, and thank you so much for supporting public education and for advocating for stability in our schools, because the support of our community members is critical, and we truly appreciate you. So thank you very much for giving us your time this evening.
And thanks so much to the league. I'm sorry, who is that?
Yeah, I was going to thank everybody for participating. Thank everyone for for following this important important topic, and that we hope that you learn things from this, and that we can work together as we further try to get adequate funding, adequate support for our public education. Thank you.
Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. We appreciate everyone's time and advocacy and look forward to upcoming events, both with our partners, the League of Women Voters, Charlotte Mecklenburg, and Every Child NC. Thanks again to our sponsors, for our interpreter tonight, and for Matt Ellenwood with the Justice Center, Cristo Salazar with Every Child NC, all our friends at the League, and our phenomenal panelists. We appreciate you. We see you. We will continue to advocate on behalf of the important work you're doing. Thanks everyone so much. Have a good night.